First of all, welcome you on the podcast, and thank you for accepting the invitation, Professor Seyfried.
Oh, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
And first of all, just a short intro. So, as I understand, your background is genetics and biochemistry.
Yes, that's correct.
And you are currently working as professor at the Boston College.
Yes, and yes, that's correct.
So, but whoever is searching for your name, they will always come to a conclusion that you have amazing knowledge on cancer, cancer prevention, or even how to handle different cancer. And now here comes the first question: is that how to handle different cancer? Are there many different cancers?
Well, it depends on how you characterize them. If you characterize cancer based on genetic mutations, you find that every one is almost different from every other one, because the numbers and kinds of mutations often differ completely from one cancer cell to another, even within the same tumor. So they often say cancer is thousands of different diseases, based on a genetic profile. But if you look at cancer based on a mitochondrial metabolic profile, it's a singular disease. All cancers that I have found all share certain characteristics in common. And that is they all ferment. And they ferment glucose and glutamine, mainly because their mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation capacity is defective. So you have to have a compensatory energy system in place. And that energy system comes from fermentation, an ancient pathway.
So in a layman terms, so can we say that there is let's say creating energy, or ATP, is like a product line? Yes. And basically the end of the product line, which is the oxphos, it's somehow broken.
Yes, that's correct.
Right? So anything before it, which is like the pyruvate, right? That's what we are talking about.
Yes. Well, you have to realize this. There's three areas of energy that can come from the cell. There's glycolysis pathway, which generates a little bit of ATP. There's the mitochondrial oxidative phosphorylation system, which generates the majority, about 90% of the cell's energy comes from the oxidative phosphorylation, which is related to our ability to breathe. We breathe air, oxygen, which serves as the final acceptor of electrons to make water. So we urinate because we're burning fuel this way, and the waste product is water. And CO2, every time we exhale CO2, which are the carbons from the food that we ate. So, and that's a very highly efficient system. So, and then we have a third system of energy, which comes from a pathway in the mitochondria matrix called the mitochondrial substrate level phosphorylation. All the biochemistry textbooks recognize this, but they always say it's only a tiny amount of energy. But in the cancer cell uses that pathway as the dominant form of energy. So oxphos is defective. The glycolysis in the cytoplasm makes a lot of precursors for growth, but very little ATP. So where all the ATP comes from, if oxphos is defective and the cytoplasmic ATP is very little, then how does this cell grow so rapidly and spread and perform all of the metabolic functions? It comes from the mitochondria through the second minor pathway that becomes a major pathway in the cancer cell. And my colleague, Dr. Shanopoulos at Semmelweis University, is the world leader in this field. And we work together to show that cancer is a disease driven by mitochondrial substrate level phosphorylation.
So, as you mentioned, Semmelweis University, it's in Budapest, right? So probably yes. I should invite him for the next podcast.
Well, Christos is very deep into biochemistry. He is very, very good. He can explain things to you. I hope he can explain it to the layperson, because sometimes I have to challenge him to explain it better to me sometimes. But he's very, very good.
Now, there is another Hungarian connections in the whole thing, which is about, as I understand, the oncogenic paradox, right? Which was probably named this way by Szent-Györgyi Albert.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes. I think
so what is the paradox?
Szent-Györgyi was in 1977, described this oncogenic paradox. Mm-hmm. And we have solved this oncogenic paradox. The paradox is essentially, how is it possible that cancer could have so many different origins? Mm-hmm. What would be the common pathophysiological mechanism that could give you cancer, knowing that you can get cancer from several different kinds of origins? For example, certain viral infections, hepatitis C, papillomavirus, they cause cancer. Mm-hmm. Exposure to toxic chemicals can cause cancer. Intermittent hypoxia can cause cancer. Radiation can cause cancer. We all know these are what we call all these different kinds of provocative mm-hmm. agents from the environment, or even certain gene mutations can put you at risk for cancer. So how is it possible that all these different provocative agents can cause the disease through a common pathway?
So basically you're saying, I'm sorry, but you're saying there are different entry points?
Yes.
The end is the same?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And the end is damage to the mitochondria.
Yes.
So the chronic damage to the mitochondria causes a gradual transition in energy from oxidative phosphorylation to substrate level phosphorylation. Mm-hmm. And it's this transition that causes the cell to enter its default state, mm-hmm. which is proliferation. And Szent-Györgyi in 1977 showed that all cells on the planet before oxygen came into the atmosphere were all highly proliferative, and they depended on on substrate. They depended on this fermentation mechanism. Mm-hmm. So what happens in cancer is the damage to the mitochondria simply causes the cells to fall back on these ancient pathways that existed before oxygen came into the planet. Excuse me, and that's the origin. The oncogenic paradox can be explained by damage to the respiration, forcing the cell into a fermentation and proliferation.
So when we talk about the mitochondria, and when we study mitochondria in the school, normally we see a cell and there is one poor mitochondria, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot more in a cell, or none, which is like the red blood cell. But we have a lot more. So it's not only one mitochondria is getting damaged, but one by one, things are getting.
Yeah, the mitochondria is not little bean shapes. Mm-hmm. If you take a cross section through the cell, the mitochondria is like spaghetti. All tubulars inside, all tubular in there. When you cut, though, you can get a piece of cross section through the spaghetti. And that looks like a little bean. So, but usually you'll see them in all different kinds of configurations. So how the cell is cut will basically determine how it looks under the microscope. But it's pretty much like a bean-shaped thing.
So when and if in the cell some amount or most of the mitochondria are getting damaged on some degree, then basically what you say is the normal energy production through the oxphos is basically getting impossible. Mm. So who is the boss here? So is the mitochondria is the boss, or the nucleus is the boss?
I think the mitochondria is the boss. Mm-hmm. And I've written about this. I think the mitochondria were largely responsible for the origin of metazoan cells, which is the beginning of multicellular organisms. Mm-hmm.
If you want to learn how to implement the ketogenic diet and the Press Pulse protocol into your cancer management, just visit school.com/keto for cancer, the new community by our research analyst Johnny Rockermeyer. Within this new community platform, you can connect with other patients and learn from their experiences. You can also just search through the posts other members have already made. You will have access to our classroom section as well, which provides practical advice and tools for the best results. These sections cover all parts of the Press Pulse protocol that you should implement. Starting with the general scientific concepts by Dr. Thomas Seyfried, we will show you how to start the ketogenic diet, including which foods to choose and which to avoid. Additionally, we prepared a list of doctors specialized in metabolic therapy, as well as details about glutamine inhibition and hyperbaric oxygen protocols. So, take a look around at school.com/keto for cancer.
So if you go back in the history of the planet, before oxygen came into the environment, all the cells were fermenting. They had no oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
It was only a certain type of cells that were able to produce oxygen into the environment by degrading iron and some of these other elements. And then there were cells that could use the oxygen. Mm-hmm. Then there was this symbiotic interaction between the fermenting cell and the cell that could use the oxygen. And that allowed cells to become much more differentiated and sophisticated. Interestingly enough, the mitochondria has its own DNA, and the nucleus has its own DNA. Now, here's the situation. There's still 13 genes that the mitochondria has that are unique only to the mitochondria. Mm-hmm. Any kind of a defect in one of these genes instantly causes the death of the cell. Mm-hmm. However, the nucleus encodes many other proteins in the mitochondria, but these are generally not as essential as the 13 genes that the mitochondria has. So if you are a business person and you have the brains of the business, you gradually allow some of your functions to go off to others.
So delegating.
But you actually control the business by having a very key role. But mm-hmm. Why should you have to do everything when you can get another dumbass organelle to do most of your work for you? And the nucleus has become the slave of the mitochondria. So the mitochondria controls much of what the nucleus does. Mm-hmm. So the turning on, turning off genes and all of these kinds of things is controlled by the retrograde signaling system between the mitochondria and the nucleus.
So basically the mitochondria has the blueprint of the business?
Yes.
Yes. And delegating all the other things to the dummy.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And it's all energy. It's all energy related. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's a sophisticated energy source, so keeps the cell in a differentiated state doing its normal function. But when that organelle, the mitochondria, becomes defective in some way, this cell reverts back to the way it was before oxygen came onto the planet.
So that means...
And that's what St. Georgi said. Mm-hmm. He said all cells before oxygen came into the atmosphere had unbridled proliferation. Mm-hmm. And they would just use fermentation until the fuel disappeared, and then they would die. Mm-hmm. So there was no differentiation, no sophistication. It was just rapid proliferation. So the mitochondria keeps the cell in a differentiated, non-proliferative state. Mm-hmm. But if they have to proliferate, mitochondria regulates the growth of the proliferation, and when it stops, it stops. But mm-hmm. when that organelle becomes defective, this cell falls back on the ancient pathway. Unbridled proliferation, no regulation, continued growth. As long as the fermentable fuel is in the body for that cell to grow, it will continue to grow.
Mm-hmm. So basically, it seems like cancer, as it is, nothing else but a survival mechanism, right?
Yeah, it'll proliferate as long as it has fermentable fuels in the environment. And just like it didn't, and if you take away the fermentable fuels, the tumor cells die.
Mm-hmm.
So just like if you took away fermentable fuels in the ancient time, the cells would immediately die, as Georgi actually said. So he called that the alpha period of the life on Earth. Alpha period was the period without oxygen, without life, just rapid proliferation.
Mm-hmm.
Only in the beta period, when the mitochondria developed, could a cell then begin to differentiate and do specific functions, because energy efficiency became much, much greater. So when you don't have to waste all of it's a very inefficient system to use fermentation, because you don't harness all of the energy in carbon-hydrogen bonds. You throw out a lot of lactic acid and all kinds of things into the microenvironment, which are not usable for energy.
Mm-hmm.
So by having oxidative phosphorylation, you have highly sophisticated energy that allows the cell now to do very sophisticated functions.
So basically, when we are using oxphos,
Yes.
we producing less reactive oxygen species, right?
Well, you produce some reactive oxygen species, and small amounts of these oxygen species are important for signaling molecules, but you don't produce a lot of them.
Correct.
So the energy efficiency, as I said, about 89 to 90% energy efficient using oxidative. You don't produce a waste products. So the waste product of oxphos is CO2 and water.
Mm-hmm.
The waste products of fermentation are lactic acid, succinic acid, all of these kinds of things, which are very energy-rich molecules, which are dumped outside the cell because the cell can't get energy from them. So, but in normal cells, those succinic acid, lactic acid would be fully oxidized to CO2 and water. So this damage to the respiration causes the cell to fall back in this de-differentiated state of unbridled proliferation.
So when I was reading your book, what was surprising to me that these cells, even when oxygen isn't present, and we know how important is oxygen for oxphos. So even when oxygen is present, this cell is still picking a different substance and burn it in a different way, right? So that's fermentation, basically. So what?
So there's the cell, actually the cancer cell, well, when in the presence of oxygen, will take up oxygen. And it looks, and it makes ATP. So the misinterpretation is that the oxygen consumption of the cancer cell and ATP coming out of the mitochondria makes it appear that the cancer cell has normal oxphos. But it doesn't, because the oxygen consumption is not linked to oxidative phosphorylation. It's a wasted futile cycle. And where the energy is coming from is the fermentation of glutamine, the major amino acid in the environment. So this has confused just about everybody in the field. And Shinopoulos and I are trying very hard to re-educate the entire oncology field to recognize that cancer does not use the oxygen to make ATP from oxidative phosphorylation. So this is the biggest internal misconception that the oncology field has right now.
As we see the background of it, I mean, there is one thing happened like 1953, I believe, the DNA, right? When they discovered DNA, and as I remember, in 1971, there was a war on cancer, right?
Yeah.
So are we winning this war, or so where are we now with this war?
No, the war is lost. Right now, it's an absurdity. It's a massive it's actually an absurd tragedy. Because what's happening is that the concept that cancer is a genetic disease has led to all of these incredibly toxic therapies and approaches to manage the disease. The most recent is the immunotherapies. These are PD-L1, CAR-T immunotherapies. They are trying to use our immune system to target cancer cells that have resistance to our immune system because of the mutations that they have. you have to realize that the mutations in cancer come as a downstream phenomenon of mitochondrial damage. So the tremendous number of mutations that you see in cancer cells are all secondary downstream effects. They're not the cause of the disease, and they have very little relevance to the disease. But yet the field focuses on this problem, or this phenotype of abnormal mutations. Therefore, we're using toxic chemicals to block the cell cycle replication, toxic chemicals to try to target the mutations in the cancer cells. This is absurd. And this is the reason why we don't have any major advances. And right now, we every day in the United States, we have over 1,600 people a day die from the cancer, which is still more than the virus. So the coronavirus, COVID-19 virus now kills about 1,000 a day or 1,200 a day. Cancer kills 1,600 people a day, over 600,000 people a year. I'm not saying that, the virus maybe over the shorter period of time can kill more than the cancer, but the virus will go away or decrease at some point. The cancer will remain.
So when you say the field is confused.
Yes.
So does that mean that
the field thinks cancer is a genetic disease. Therefore, the therapies that we are using to manage the cancer is not working because it's not a genetic disease. So if you treat cancer as a mitochondrial metabolic disease, then you can develop therapies that simply target the available fermentation fuels, glucose and glutamine, because they provide all of the energy for the cell.
But when you say this, it sounds really simple. But on the other hand, when we talk to oncologists, they somehow describe cancer cell as a very smart, highly intelligent cell, which is just hiding from everything and creates its own protection and prevention. So
well, those because those people don't understand the problem. If they understood the problem, how come we have 1,600 people a day dying from cancer? If they really, it's so complicated. No, it's a very simple disease. It's not complicated at all. Every cancer cell ferments glucose and glutamine. We publish papers. Other people are publishing papers. When you pull the glucose and glutamine, the tumor cells die. You transition the body over to ketones because the tumor cell can't use the ketones, but all the normal cells in the body can use ketones and fatty acids. The tumor cell cannot use fatty acids or ketones. So you do, and then you target the glutamine, and the disease should be resolved. So who is doing this? No one is doing this. Why? Because they think it's a genetic disease. This is the tragedy. This is the tragedy that we have.
How common is that a cancer cell can use, let's say, ketones? Because sometimes,
they can't use ketones.
Sometimes you see they claiming, some of the doctors and people are claiming like, but there is this mutation which actually drives on ketones.
That's nonsense. It's nonsense. How if you look at then look under the microscope and look at the mitochondria of the tumor that you're looking at. I have just gone through, I just made the big list right here. Here are the cancers that have defective mitochondria. You cannot get energy from ketones unless you have good mitochondria. Okay? To get energy, ketone body is metabolized in the mitochondria. Okay? And the energy comes from oxidative phosphorylation. You must have a good structure to do this, mitochondria structure and the function. So here are the cancers that have abnormal mitochondria. You listen. Breast cancer, mammary cancers, defective mitochondria. Colorectal, gastric cancer, defective mitochondria. All forms of glioma, brain cancers, defective mitochondria. Bladder cancers, defective mitochondria. Hepatic liver cancers, defective mitochondria. Kidney cancer, defective mitochondria. Leukemias and lymphomas, defective mitochondria. All kinds of lung cancers, defective mitochondria. Melanoma, defective mitochondria. Neuroblastoma, defective mitochondria. Ovarian cancers, defective mitochondria. Pancreatic cancer, defective mitochondria. prostate cancer, defective mitochondria. Osteosarcoma, defective mitochondria. Retinoblastoma, defective mitochondria. Salivary gland cancers, defective mitochondria. Every one of these cancers, which represent the large majority of almost every cancer, have the same problem, defective mitochondria. Every one of these cancers uses tremendous amounts of glucose in the glycolytic pathway for metabolites to grow fast. All of these cancers are using glutamine to generate energy. So if I take away glucose and glutamine, I should kill all these cancers. And the answer is yes.
But
just people don't know about it.
But again, is it one of the reason because the profession are not giving the appropriate answer to this problem, that the individuals started to make steps on their own, and let's say they read your book, read an article with you, and they say, well, if I can take away carbohydrates, and I'm some degree glutamine, which is, I think it's a lot more difficult.
Well, you need a drug. You need a drug for that.
Correct. So then I could at least slow it down.
Yeah.
So what I see that most people who are kind of fed up with the system started to go and find solutions like ketogenic diet and etc. Right?
Yeah.
So basically, suddenly ideas like fasting, and time-restricted feeding, and low carb, for a huge amount of people, it's basically part of the solution.
Yeah.
So now the solution comes from the layman.
Yes.
And in my experience, this is not something the doctors really like.
No. So here's the situation. You're asking, why does the field not recognize what I'm saying? Right? Okay.
Exactly.
Three major reasons, and they're very, very powerful reasons. Okay. Number one, I never heard of this. Most oncologists, what do you mean? I never heard of this before. Reason number one, it's new to me. If it were so important, I would have read about it in the textbooks.
Okay, that's fair.
Right? Number two, the dogma of the gene theory. The dogma, all the textbooks say cancer is a genetic disease. Every biology, biochemistry, and genetics books, they start off, cancer is a genetic disease. This has been going on for more than 20 years now. So all of the oncologists and scientists have been indoctrinated into the view that cancer is a genetic disease, because all of the books I have ever read about this talk about cancer as a genetic disease. When you have a dogma, this is like religion. You treat people in the young brain, and the young brain is wired to think in a certain way. And that wiring is very, very difficult to change. Religion is dogma. You cannot convince the Muslim that Judaism is the true religion, or vice versa, because this brain has been dogmatically hardwired to think in a certain way. And when you tell everybody for years that cancer is a genetic disease, that's what it is. Okay. The third reason is people's salary. You cannot convince someone of a new concept when their salary depends on them not accepting this. So most of the oncologists are using radiation, chemo, and surgery, and all these different kinds of things. And they make a lot of money doing this. And now you come along and tell somebody, you really don't need a lot of that anymore. You can do very other kinds of things to manage the, I can't do that.
So my salary. Are you saying the third one is basically that money is more important than saving lives?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are so many articles that describe this. There's absolutely no question about this. The life is less important than the finance of the economy. We already know this. These immunotherapies are hundreds of thousands of dollars to use these they kill half the people that they're getting. They're based on a flawed understanding of what the disease, and they're not working. Okay, why? So why would you persist with these expensive therapies that don't work, and for the majority of people cost so much money? Because it's based on the gene theory, and the gene theory supports the financial institution of cancer. Cancer is big business. It's driven by the pharmaceutical industries, and you're not going to change people overnight to say, hey, the disease which I thought was something is totally different. How can I make money on ketogenic diets and glutamine targeting?
Exactly, and because the solution you are actually offering, that it doesn't seem like very lucrative for the system.
No, it's not. But it could be. I think some people can find out how to make money on anything. Mm-hmm. But bottom line is, especially, it's an economic situation. So the three come back. I never heard of it. I am a dogmatic view that cancer is a genetic disease, and I could never do this because my salary depends on me not doing it.
Sure.
You put all three of, yeah. So the layperson is interested in this because they have the disease and they want to survive. Mm-hmm. But the oncologists and the field, no. The purpose is not, your sickness drives the economy that we have. What am I going to do? So this is threatening to the entire industry. But I don't really care. The issue is, what is the truth? What is our fundamental understanding of the biology of the problem? Mm-hmm. And when you understand the biology of the problem, you have to say to yourself, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. We can manage. Do you really want to resolve the disease, or do you want to perpetuate the disease so it can drive an industry? And the answer is, for me, I want to know that we can resolve the disease. Mm-hmm. And we can do it without toxicity, without harming the rest of the body. And we can recover a lot of lives and keep people alive a lot longer with a higher quality of life, simply because we have a better understanding of the biology of the disease, and we know how to manage it and prevent it. But how fast is that going to be incorporated into the worldview? So our approach has been targeting the layperson, not the guys in the top medical schools. They're the last people on the planet to accept what we're saying. Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. So the people, we go to the people themselves. And when the people say, I want metabolic therapy instead of radiation and chemo, what are these guys going to do? What are the oncologists going to do? They're going to say, well, go somewhere else. Well, eventually they are going to go somewhere else. And these folks aren't going to have anybody to work on. So because people want to live. The bottom line is, people want to live. They don't want to be poisoned and harmed for a treatment that they can survive with an alternative view. And this is what our approach is.
About 2 years ago, probably, I've seen a podcast with you, and for us a little part, you were talking about Greg Glassman. And you were talking about CrossFit, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I saw later on you started to work with them, and you had presentations for them. So am I right that you start, since you don't see much reaction from the field, you started to go to the people who are willing to listen, willing to change, and willing to implement what you are suggesting? And CrossFit is one of them, probably.
Well, I didn't reach out to CrossFit. CrossFit reached out to me.
Sure.
So Greg Glassman, a friend of mine, read my book, mm-hmm. And was blown away. And then his father, Jeff Glassman, is a former NASA scientist, worked for the federal government in rocket science, I believe. He's a very smart man. And Greg asked his father to read my book. And the father had many, many questions about my concepts. And I wrote a very detailed letter explaining a lot of the details that I didn't have time to explain in the book, or didn't, and got back with Jeff Glassman, Greg's father. And I explained to him all of the details and how we obtained and all of this. And then he became convinced. And Greg and his father both realized that what we are saying is the truth of cancer. Mm-hmm. And it's logical, and it's based on hard biological concepts. Mm-hmm. Structure determines function. This is evolutionary biology. You have to understand evolution. You have to understand fundamental biological principles. And then the cancer problem becomes very easily understood. But if you have all of these other interfering conditions, like cancer is a genetic disease and the mutation, that takes your mind away from the simplicity of the disease. And it makes it look incredibly complicated and very difficult to understand. But it's not. If you push that away, it's irrelevant. It's mostly irrelevant. So you don't bother your mind with that. So it becomes much less problematic.
I see. So sometimes just being on different forums or even reading some of the researchers' material, they're claiming things like protein is causing cancer or sugar is causing cancer.
Well,
so
yeah.
What is your take on that?
Well, the sugar issue, it doesn't cause cancer directly. So if we take a lot of sugar into our bodies, we get type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is associated with systemic inflammation. Okay? Systemic inflammation can cause damage to mitochondria in certain cells of certain tissues. So chronic high blood sugar associated with type 2 diabetes leads to elevated C-reactive protein, which is a marker for systemic inflammation. And then who knows, people with type 2 diabetes have higher incidence of pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer. They have a lot of other kinds of cancers that are indirectly linked to systemic inflammation. So you can go back and you can piece together all of the linkages between various conditions and the origin of cancer.
What about protein, which is, animal protein is now on everybody's list as a...
I don't know. We evolved to eat animal protein. I mean, if you think of the Plains Indians, I mean, they would kill and eat buffaloes. What were they? Do you think they were worried that cancer was as a matter of fact, primitive Aboriginal peoples, cancer never existed in these, rarely if ever. Albert Schweitzer went to Africa. He said cancer doesn't exist in these people. When the British came to look at the Inuits, the Eskimos, they didn't have a word in their dictionary for cancer. So cancer doesn't. And then I look at the chimpanzee. In fact, I wrote it in a recent paper. We just published it on breast cancer. There's not yet been a documented case of breast cancer in a female chimpanzee. So they have 98% or more protein and genetic similarity to us. And yet they never get cancer, rarely. Cancer is rare in chimpanzees, all kinds. No breast. Why 33,000 American women die each year from breast cancer? And the chimp is the same, and they have never breast cancer. Why is that? Diet and lifestyle. The chimpanzee is not eating big pizzas, donuts, and a lot of high-fat foods, and they're eating their natural diet. So the diet that the chimp gets today, whether he's in the jungle or in the zoo, is the same diet that he evolved to eat. Right. We are no longer eating the diets that we evolved to eat. We have technologically changed our diets to food high carbohydrate, minimal nutritional value, creates systemic inflammation, and puts us at risk for cancer, all kinds of cancers. So it's very clear what's going on here,
Is fat on the list? I mean, for decades, fat was the bad guy. And turns out there are bad fats, which might cause a lot of inflammation. But most likely not the saturated fats, right?
Yeah, well, don't forget, when we go on ketogenic diets, we take in plenty of saturated, plenty, lower amounts of saturated fats, because the saturated fats cause ketones. So you need to elevate the ketones. The ketones come from the saturated fat. The saturated fat, especially palmitic acid, the various caprylic acid, these kinds of short chain, medium chain triglyceride fats. They go to the liver, and the liver makes beta hydroxybutyrate out of them, and then you get the energy from the beta hydroxybutyrate. Okay, that can replace glucose in the majority of tissues. Very, very healthy. But you don't sit down and eat a big tub of fat, like a big bottle of lard. Nobody who does this. But the way we eat lard is we take a cake and we take the lard or the Crisco and we add sugar to the Crisco. Yes. And that becomes the icing on the cake. And now we like it. It's very tasty. But if you eat the fat without the sugar, you don't like it. So, but and don't forget our primitive ancestors, the paleo, they would smash the bones to get the marrow, all fat. The marrow is fat.
Sure.
So, but they're not eating a big tub of this stuff. And you have to use a lot of energy to kill the elephant to get the marrow. So the paleo, it's all, we evolved to, don't forget, if we were not able to eat proteins and fats, and we are omnivorous. We can eat anything.
Mm-hmm.
We can eat, and people on the planet you hear a lot of strange things. People eat all kinds of weird things. So we evolved to eat almost everything. The problem is, and that kept us alive, and that's the reason why we're a species today, because we were more adaptable to climate changes and radical changes in the environment than other species. Okay, but we pay a price for that. We pay a price now for that because our technology has made abundance of all these delicious foods, minimal nutritional value, and it puts us at risk for all these diseases, which the chimpanzee does not have.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned another input for cancer, and that was hypoxia.
Yes.
So when we talk about hypoxia, that means that, okay, so now the oxphos is damaged for whatever reason. That's
well, hypoxia can damage oxphos.
Correct. So that's what I wanted to ask. So does it work otherwise than hypoxia?
Yeah.
But how does hypoxia could happen when I'm breathing?
Well, you're not going to get hypoxia when you're breathing. Mm-hmm. It's intermittent hypoxia that happens. So, for example, if a woman in a breast has an occluded milk duct, okay, that would cause a local hypoxia or inflammation, which causes hypoxia, which damages respiration. Some people who have diabetes have sleep apnea.
Sure. Yes.
This is an interruption of oxygen into the body.
Correct.
Okay. And you put that on top of a systemic inflammation combined with hypoxia, you put yourself at risk for getting cancer in various tissues, because that will damage that will damage mitochondria. Otto Warburg was one of the first people to show you could cause cancer in cells by intermittent hypoxia. So he was able to induce cancer in cells by interrupting the oxygen flow because it damaged respiration.
So basically, if the Bohr effect is not working properly, right? For whatever reasons, so either occlusion or any other things, then the tissue cannot uptake oxygen from the bloodstream.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's causing hypoxia in the tissue, in the cell.
Yes.
And then either it wants or not, it has to switch to fermentation because there is just not enough oxygen.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And it's this intermittent. What happens is if you have intermittent hypoxia, you have some damage, but not complete damage. Because as Warburg said, if it's too acute, the cell dies, and you can never get cancer from a dead cell. Mm-hmm. So it has to be a sequential intermittent over protracted periods of time. Mm-hmm. And every time you interfere with oxidative phosphorylation and then bring in oxygen, you create reactive oxygen species, ROS.
Sure.
ROS are carcinogenic and mutagenic. Mm-hmm. So clearly they are linked to the origin of cancer through damage to the oxidative phosphorylation. Everything comes back to oxidative damage to oxidative.
Are we talking about here, like pretty much as we always say, that those make up the poison, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm asking the reason because of performance and sport perspective, where we're causing on some degree hypoxia, but it's not complete hypoxia. It's not anoxia or something like that, but it's just a limitation of oxygen, right?
It's a limitation of oxygen chronically, not acutely, because we have a tremendous wound healing capacity. Mm-hmm. To correct all kinds of issues in our body can be corrected. Cancer is also recognized as an unhealed wound. When the damage becomes so chronic, the body keeps throwing out more and more inflammatory cytokines to try to facilitate wound healing. And all those growth factors and cytokines actually work opposite of what they should work and actually contributes to the growth.
So what are those? Those are like interleukin-6 and,
Yes. Yes.
tumor
These
necrosis factors.
IL-10 and all these kinds of things.
Ah,
They're
okay.
all part of the wound healing process. But our bodies wound heal in a very ordered way. And when cancer comes, the very growth factors that are supposed to facilitate wound healing will actually contribute to how fast the tumor grows. And the more the tumor grows, the more lactic acid is released, which then drives in more cells like macrophage. This is where we get metastatic cancer from.
Ah, okay.
The metastatic cancer is our immune system trying to heal the wound, fusing with these incipient
So that's the
tumors.
macrophage, right?
Yes. So the macrophage is fusing, which is a normal cell of our body that facilitates wound healing, is facilitating, fusing with these other kinds of cells, cancer cells, but the cancer cell can't metastasize by itself. So where does this ability to spread through the body come from? It comes from the fusion hybridization of our cell that normally has this genetic capability, but now becomes energetically destabilized. So it proliferates like crazy, but it's a cell that normally enters and exits the bloodstream, enters and exits tissues, and they become our metastatic cancer cells. And all of the metastatic cancer cells that we have evaluated all have characteristics of macrophages. So we've looked at this in many, many different cancers: brain cancer, lung cancer, colon cancer. They all have characteristics of macrophage, but of course they have destabilized energy metabolism. They still require glucose and glutamine. As a matter of fact, glutamine is the main fuel for cells of our immune system. So
that's
all
what,
the blood.
that's what I wanted to ask. It's kind of ironic that the very cell it's causing the metastasis or helping is basically living on glutamine.
Yes.
Which, as I understand, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but if somebody who's under different kind of oncological treatments, they getting extra glutamine because of sometimes the burning effect of radiation.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And a lot of these things are nonsensical if you think about it in what you're doing. And a lot of the cancer patients get high dose sugars and eat as much carbohydrate.
They've been getting cakes, right?
Oh, yeah, eat everything. Yeah, because and it's all absurd. How could you do that when you know that this is what's going to drive the cancer? So, and the other thing that's crazy is that if you take radiation and your body can be damaged, they give you hyperbaric oxygen to correct the damage of the radiation. But you can't use hyperbaric oxygen to help kill the cancer cells. The insurance company won't cover that, but they'll cover hyperbaric oxygen to facilitate to help correct the damage from the radiation. Yes, high dose glutamine is often given to cancer patients from all the damage from the radiation and all these other things because it builds up your immune system. But if the cancer cell is part of your immune system, you run the risk of rescuing some of those tumor cells, which will later come back at you and kill you. So most of the things we do in the oncology clinic make no sense at all when you understand that cancer is the biology of the disease. And consequently, 1,600 people a day die from this disease because we don't know what we're doing for the most part.
So your protocol is basically limiting glucose in one way, limiting glutamine. Of course, it's more difficult issue as I understand that it has to be through medication, and also using hyperbaric oxygen. So in this whole thing, what is hyperbaric oxygen is doing with the cell, with the cancer cell?
Yeah, well, hyperbaric oxygen, we think, will act to kill cancer cells by the same mechanism that radiation kills cancer cells. So radiation kills cancer cells by increasing reactive oxygen species, not only in the cell, but also in the microenvironment. But when we pull away glucose and we put people in hyperbaric oxygen, don't forget, ketones will protect normal cells from reactive oxygen damage. But ketones, the tumor cells cannot use the ketones. So they become vulnerable to higher reactive oxygen species inside the cell, especially when glucose is reduced, because glucose provides glutathione indirectly through the pentose pathway. And glutathione is an antioxidant system in the cell. You don't want you want glutathione high in the normal cell and low in the cancer cell.
Sure.
So what we do is we give ketones to raise glutathione and
In the
actually
normal cell,
to
in the
actually
healthy cell.
yeah, normal cells. Yes. So the tumor cell now becomes more vulnerable to oxidative stress, oxidative damage. When you put patient in therapeutic ketosis where the blood sugar is low, ketones are high, and then into hyperbaric oxygen, now you have a better chance of killing the tumor cells while avoiding all kinds of damage to the normal cells. This is the plan.
So I have a question with that. I'm sorry to, but okay. So there is the endogenous antioxidant system we have, what you were mentioning with glutathione and everything else. So when somebody has a cancer, is it really a good idea to take certain kind of antioxidants, which might elevate the level of also the cancer cells' internal protection system? So is it a good idea?
Yeah, no, it's, I don't know, but I wouldn't do it.
Just by logic, I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, it makes, this is what most people ask. They always say that, oh, I'm taking all these antioxidants. I'm taking all these vitamins. You know, we did a study one time, and, you know, vitamins are very, very powerful molecules, but they're all in tiny amounts, right? You don't need a lot. You know, people pounding all these vitamins. We found that the tumor cell needs the vitamins more than the normal cells. So why you take all these vitamins?
So basically, they can build a stronger shield, right?
Yeah, because their metabolism is so disrupted that the vitamins they need them. We have some preliminary data. We never published it, but it seems that they need the vitamins more than the normal cells need the vitamins. So why are you pumping all these vitamins? You just need a small amount of them. You only need them for the normal cells of your body. Eating a well-balanced diet, you shouldn't need any extra vitamins. All the vitamins that...
Yeah, but see, Professor Seyfried, this is the problem, because if you ask an expert and you ask what is a well-balanced diet, you will get about 10,000 different opinions from 10,000 different experts. Is that true, right?
Well, I don't know. What's the goal of the expert? To kill the tumor cell or to do something else?
I agree with that.
Right. So, I mean, my goal here is to resolve the disease in someone's body.
Sure.
Right. So you're going to use all your biological tricks that you understand the tumor's weakness, and you're going to try to eliminate those populations of cells while you're keeping the rest of the body healthy. You can have all the opinions in the world and all this and all that, but the bottom line is we know the weakness of the cell. We know how to exploit that weakness to resolve the disease. And this is the plan that we are on. Okay. So you can either do that, or you can take radiation and chemo and see how that works for you. Sure. So you know, it's going to be an entirely different approach. Now, I'm not saying that we have the answer to all aspects of this problem. We know the core aspects, but can we improve and streamline and modify the approach by tweaking different aspects of the diet under the right conditions? And the answer is yes, probably. But I am not there yet, because if I can resolve the disease without worrying about these other things, then that's the approach I'm going to take. Because the bottom line that drives our research is one word, and that word is resolution. Sure. If you resolve the disease, you don't have to worry about a lot of other things. So we every time we try a new treatment, how well does it resolve? And I have to be honest with you, it's much more difficult to resolve cancer in a mouse than it is in a human. The mouse has a totally different kind of metabolism. Very, very hard to save a mouse's life when you have a natural mouse cancer, not these artificial things that they create in the labs, these gene knockout mice and all this kind of stuff. You know, that's only to get another research grant. It's not to help resolve the disease. Yes. Our goal is to resolve the damn disease. Okay, so when I put these kinds of therapies on humans, we're all shocked. We can't believe how well they work in humans. We don't see the same therapeutic benefits in the mouse that we see in the human. So we're saying, woo, this is really exciting. So
let's
I have
talk
two.
about results.
Yeah.
Let's talk
Okay,
about
so-
results. So let's say somebody's following the protocol you're approaching for quite a long
Well, we
time,
haven't
by the
written the
way.
quote. Don't forget, we have not yet written the treatment protocol that can be used, adapted to all clinics. I have a group of physicians and scientists that I'm currently working with, nutritionists, physicians, and scientists, and we're all putting together the treatment protocol as we speak. This treatment protocol will then be distributed to clinics that will want to treat their patients with metabolic therapy. So we have to know all the biomarkers that we need to measure to document therapeutic success. We have to be aware of individual dietary preferences and intolerances. So we're working on all of these systems right now to come up with a protocol. And once that we have the protocol, my colleagues in oncology clinics will begin to do this, and they'll make modifications as we go forward, because this is not a well-defined approach.
Are you passionate about the groundbreaking and heroic research of Dr. Thomas Seyfried on metabolic therapy and cancer? So are we. That's why we've created something special for you, in collaboration with Johnny Rockermeyer, a German book publisher and translator. Introducing our collection of meticulously crafted books that distill the essence of Dr. Seyfried's work. Dive into the science and discoveries. These summary books are your gateway to understanding the intricate world of metabolic ketogenic therapy in a clear, concise, and engaging way. Whether you're new to the subject or a seasoned enthusiast, our books offer insights that can change your life. Ready to explore this transformative knowledge? Visit our website at www.cancerasametabolicdisease.com to get your copy. You can buy the ebook there directly and the paper book via the provided links. Here's the best part. A portion of every purchase goes directly to support Dr. Thomas Seyfried's groundbreaking research. That's why the direct ebook purchase is the best option to donate as much as possible. You can see all of the donations Mr. Rockermeyer has already made at www.ketoforcancer.net. That's right, when you buy our books, you're not just investing in your own knowledge, you're also contributing to the future of cancer research. Help us make a difference. Together, we can drive change and save lives.
Like if you're going to get radiation treatment, you sit down, they mark some part of your body, they nuke some part because they know the power of the radiation, how long you should do this, and those are protocols. How much chemo you can give a person without killing them. These are protocols that have been adapted because they practiced a lot on people and killed a lot of people, right?
Sure.
So we are building this metabolic treatment protocol to eliminate the tumor without harming the rest of the body. But we still have to work it out because there's individual details that we work. So the results in large trials are not available. We have case reports.
Exactly. That's why, because most people would ask you like, okay, show me the metals, show me the RCTs, but you have hundreds of case studies now, right?
Well, we're getting more and more. Some of them are poorly done, and some of them are done better. And people always say, well, we should do more studies, more studies, more studies. If you did it the right way in the first place, you wouldn't need all these other studies because you'd have the results very clear. But the problem is, in medicine, they want you to do a double-blind crossover, but you can't do that with metabolic therapy.
Yeah, it's not ethical.
Yeah, well, it's not only not ethical, but people know what they're getting. I mean, if I'm taking a ketogenic diet, I'm measuring I have to be in a certain GKI value to get therapeutic benefit.
Sure.
And this other guy, what is he taking? He's eating a big chocolate cake. It's you can see who's in the right group. So it's not a double blind. So, but the bottom line is resolution. Like we have a couple of cases that I'm going to work up very soon with a young girl who was diagnosed with DIPG, diffuse infiltrating pontine glioma, and her story just came out on the web with the keto. She's out many, many years now because that's a very deadly tumor for little children. It's in the brainstem. They don't usually live beyond 2 years. Most of them are dead within the first year or a few months. She's out like 6 years, 7 years now. And Pablo Kelly from England.
I heard about him, yes.
So he's still going 6 years out. He'll be 6 years. Yeah, with no radiation. And I wrote a big paper on this. And I said the standard of care is killing most of the brain cancer patients. Mm-hmm. How do you think that went over in the field, right? What are you telling these guys? You're saying that the very treatments they're using is putting the people at risk for reduced lifespan. Mm-hmm. I mean, they don't want to hear that. Who would if you're making a lot of money doing radiation treatment and somebody says don't do that anymore? What are you going to do? My goal is resolution. We want to keep people alive without toxicity.
So apparently you are not the poster child for oncology, right? The modern oncology.
Well, it depends. Some of my colleagues who are oncologists are extremely enthusiastic about what we're doing.
That's great.
Because they have seen so many patients dead over the years. My friend Joe Maroon, who was the chief of surgical brain surgery, neurosurgery in the country. He's one of our contributors, Dr. Joe Maroon. He said, I operated on 400 patients with glioblastoma and not one ever survived. Hmm. And he said, somebody has to do something different. And I'm saying, yes, Joe, we don't irradiate or nuke. We don't do that anymore. We should have to stop doing that. And that's like the biggest revenue. I had somebody at a hospital told me, hospitals will have to close if we don't do these kinds of procedures because the revenue generation supports all the other procedures that don't make any money. Well, this is the truth.
Yes.
This is the financial part of the problem.
Yeah.
So is it more important to generate revenue or is it to resolve the disease? And those are the questions that people have to ask. Now, if you have the disease, you're interested in saving your life. You're not interested in worrying this guy's kid's going to be going to a top college. These are the issues that have to be addressed. If you want to move the field forward, this has to be a consideration.
Let's talk about some prevention.
Yes.
Let's say somebody's listening now this podcast and they're getting all disappointed and stressed because they see no way out, right? But there is a way out. So let's start with the prevention. So somebody who just want to have give me a few steps. What should I do to lower the risk?
Well, yeah, it's a very good question, but we know that you can't get cancer if your mitochondria remains healthy. Mm-hmm. So how do you keep your mitochondria healthy? Well, you do exercise and you eat the right foods. And you try to reduce stress and you try to do these kinds of things.
Is that so simple? I mean, it's not too simple.
Yeah, it's not. It's actually conceptually simple, but in practice difficult.
Is there a pill? Is there a pill we can just take and not get?
Well, that's what a lot of friends were talking about. The ketogenic diet and a pill. But yeah, well, you're right. It's not easy. Because we're living in a society, modern societies are constantly putting us at risk for mitochondrial damage. Age, the older you get, the more damage you have to tissue mitochondria. Mm-hmm. And aging is basically a gradual reduction in the ability of cellular mitochondria to maintain a delta G prime ATP hydrolysis, which is the basic level of energy needed for life. So it gradually degrades and you eventually die from organ failure because your body can no longer generate the energy needed to remain alive. But to prevent risk from cancer, you have to reduce those provocative agents that damage mitochondria. Mm-hmm. So, if you avoid viral infections, if you avoid intermittent hypoxia, if you avoid exposure to radiation and toxic carcinogens, if you exercise, will keep your mitochondria healthier because you're taking in more oxygen. Mm-hmm. Your body is more facilitatory towards cleansing and this kinds of things. Is it possible to develop a therapy, a preventive therapy that would require a pill together with a diet? We don't know yet. Mm-hmm. So we're working on that actually. Because I live in this society too. I don't want to do half the stuff that I tell other people to do. But if I had cancer, I would definitely have to do it.
That's what I wanted to ask. Okay, so at one point fasting will come up and probably it will come up 3 to 7, 8 days fasting.
Yeah.
Which, most people would freak out. I mean, even most doctors would freak out, not just...
Oh, I freak out too.
Sure. So that's what I want to ask. How about you?
Oh, try it and see how you like it.
Sure.
I used to tell my father when he had diabetes before he passed away, I said, Dad, you gotta fast for a few days to get your body healthy. He said, you do it and tell me what it's like.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, they don't want to do this. Older people not going to, what do I have to do? Don't eat for 5 days? Are you kidding me? I live every day to eat something.
Yeah, but for being serious, so let's say that somebody is doing fasting, let's say like once a week, 24 hours.
Yeah.
And occasionally maybe 2-3 days, and then once a year, maybe 5 days. Would you
Yes.
see this as a reasonable
Yes.
preventive measure?
Yes. Yes.
Wow,
It'll reduce risk. Let's put it that way. It's a cancer risk reduction therapy. Does it work on everybody? No. Will it work on the majority of people? Yes. Okay. It's like anything. There's no 100% a treatment that's going to prevent everybody from getting cancer.
Sure.
Okay. Even the chimpanzee, there's been some reports, rare as they are, some chimpanzees did get cancer.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, some chimps got cancer from drinking cow's milk because the chimp's body, there was unprepared cow's milk that had a virus in it. And the chimps drank this milk and they got the cancer from the virus from the milk they drank. So, I mean, they're so rare, you can almost name the studies. So again, why the chimpanzee doesn't get cancer? So they have the same genes as us. They're almost identical to us, but they don't get cancer. They don't fast, right? They don't smoke and they don't drink liquor, and they eat a diet. Their actual diet is extremely preventative to mitochondrial damage. They have a lot of antioxidant fuel, all these different kinds of proteins and vitamins that are found in these plant products. And they also eat proteins. They eat ants and insects and kill monkeys and eat the monkey meat raw without cooking it. So you want to know what you have to do? Get the chimpanzee diet. Who's going to want to do that, right? Nobody.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, you mentioned one other thing which was very interesting. You mentioned controlling stress, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It is very important, I guess, as prevention, but also as the cancer management, right? So for
yes,
the cancer
both.
patient.
Yes, both.
So what is the reason?
Stress increases cortisol in the blood, and cortisol raises blood sugar. And chronic cortisol elevation leads to elevated blood sugar, which can lead to systemic inflammation. So everything comes back to the same risk factors: inflammation, hypoxia, infections. If you have an infection, being in high glucose and high stress can make that infection worse, put you at a different risk. So all of these things compounded together, you can have more than one of these stress factors together, put you at a higher risk.
Sure.
So reducing stress.
So same with sleeping, right? I guess.
Yeah, if you can get good sleep, all of these things will reduce risk to some extent. You're not going to 100%, because we're living in an environment where. But I think everybody can reduce. Otto Warburg said you could probably reduce 80% of all cancers by changing diet and lifestyle and things like this. And I agree with that.
That's good enough.
But it's very hard to do this though. I mean, you walk by a grocery store, fresh bakery with a big piece of bread. You put the butter on the bread. I mean, this is, we love this stuff. Are you kidding me? You tell me I can't do this anymore? No, I'm not saying you can't do it anymore. I'm just saying you might not be able to do it as often as you did it before.
Sure.
But either way, and you've got to take foods that are going to lower blood sugar and elevate ketones. So the paleo diets that Cosma Toth and Sophia Clemens claim, they're pretty much carnivores in the way they eat vegetables and meat, but everything is low glycemic. Yeah, everything is low glycemic, so they're reducing blood sugar as much as possible. And this was our ancient ancestors. We had no sugar in the environment except for ripe fruits, right? Where we get our glucose. So if you eat organ meat like liver, liver is loaded with glycogen.
Sure.
So glycogen is simply long chains of sugar. So we have to break the glycogen down from the animal that we eat in order to raise our blood sugar, which comes from within. So we're not drinking Coca-Cola. loaded with and high fructose corn syrup. That stuff is deadly. They should put a skull and crossbone on high fructose corn syrup, and it's in all kinds of foods. All these different foods have high fructose corn syrup in there. So that should have the same thing you put on carbon tetrachloride, skull and crossbones. They should do that with high fructose corn syrup as well.
Sure.
It's a deadly fuel. It's a deadly poison material. You don't put that in your body, but everybody does. Oh, why do I have so much cancer? Heart disease, dementia, all of these things, they're all related to mitochondrial damage in one way or another.
Now, another question, and pretty much we are at the end of it, but what really interests me is so what is your drive? Because I'm watching you, following you for years, and I see this huge passion, sometimes even passion with some degree of anger. Probably.
Well, I don't know if it's probably more frustration than anything.
Okay.
So
what drives you?
Well, I think knowing that we understand the biology of the problem and how to manage this problem and significantly reduce the problem. And the vast majority of people look at you like you're coming from outer space. They rarely read the actual evidence that supports what I'm saying. I spent thousands and thousands of hours reading the details of many of these experiments and looking. I know I can, in about 2 minutes, I can tell you whether the information in this paper is going to be important or not important. Mm-hmm. So I can sort through massive numbers of papers just by eliminating stuff that I know is not important. But the stuff that is important, is there a consistency in the evidence that comes from what I think are the important articles? And there is a consistency that's striking. Goes back to Otto Warburg. How many papers have I seen supporting Otto Warburg's central theory? Hundreds. Why are these papers ignored? Because cancer is a genetic disease. It's not so the dogma comes in.
Sure.
So it's and I have to be honest with you, there's scientific arguments where there's a good point, but unless you know the details of the argument, you've got to be able to ferret out those weaknesses in the other individual's argument. So for me, the passion comes from knowing we have an answer to make this situation better. And it takes a lot of energy and commitment to forge through to convince those individuals who do not see this clearly as how do we possibly get these people to see this clearly. Mm-hmm. So you have to realize that there's the seahorse technology. This is an instrument that measures oxygen consumption rate and extracellular acidification. It's used in almost, I would say, 85% of all oncology labs use this instrument to study energy metabolism in cancer cells. Mm-hmm. So they're all showing that oxygen consumption is linked to oxidative phosphorylation. It's not. So you have an instrument that everybody's using that's giving you misinformation. So it's very hard for someone who has a big research grant and has published many papers to have someone tell them that the information you got is misinformation. Well, they don't want to hear that either, even though they're in the same field as you. So you not only have to deal with oncologists who know very little about the biology of the disease, you have to deal with your own members of the field who are also misinformed on many key aspects. Mm-hmm. So you put all this together and you have a very, very difficult task to convince. But the bottom line is that lay people with cancer start using metabolic therapy and are living longer with less toxic effects, you're on the right path. I've seen it work. You're right. So we're going right for the heart of the problem and let all the dust settle on the other things. They'll come along. They will come eventually. Because when they get...
So that's your payoff? That's your payoff, basically, to see that it actually works?
Absolutely. Yeah, so the payoff is now, of course, we get donations from private foundations. We need the money. It's very hard to get money from the federal government when you're telling most of the people that are reviewing your grants that you may not be on the right, so that it's hard to get research when the scientists who question some parts of your problem, so you have that problem. But private foundations have been supportive of us. Mm-hmm. Travis Christofferson's foundation,
Yeah.
single cause metabolic therapies. Greg Glassman has been supportive of us. The UK British Childhood Cancer has supported us. Edward Miller, a guy who has a few bucks, he throws money at our program. So we keep the program going with a shoestring budget that we will get to the end, but it just takes us a little bit longer to get there. Yeah, if somebody invested big in our program, we'd have the answer and we'd have the data much faster. But we will get there. There's no question about it. And there's enough people that'll come to realize what we're saying, and they'll say yes, 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 yes.
Sure.
Just a matter of time. So, so it gives you something. What else are you going to do, right? I teach the students. They get all excited about this. They want to go out and do stuff, and then you see the results on patients that are emailing me every day saying that they should have been dead and they're alive. So, what you're doing is working. So you just got to get it out, make more people aware of this. And then I think maybe in 10 or 20 years, this will be the standard of care, at some point.
Yes. That sounds pretty good, sir. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it very much, to be honest. And a lot of my things that, I was having some confusion about, it's completely answered. So I'm really, really happy. Yeah. Really happy.
And I would say, if you really want the more detailed biochemistry, get a hold of Dr. Christos Xenopoulos.
Yes, sir.
At Semmelweis.
Yes, sir. I will track him down.
He'll give you a much greater detail of the concepts that I've been speaking about.
Thank you very much.
Listen,
I really appreciate that.
Okay. Well, listen, I'll let you go. And very nice speaking with you. And have a nice day.
You too. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye. Bye.